I want to welcome you back to Seniors.
Can we talk?
Today, I want you to join Polly Lemire and myself, Linda Priaulx. We want to have you grab a cup of coffee, grab a cup of tea, get your favorite beverage. You're coming to our house today, and we're coming to your house today to have a conversation that we think is important. And today we're going to talk about loneliness, but you're not alone because you have Polly and you have me. So, one of the things that came to me when Polly and I were chatting one day is a story that she had told me about a woman who lived in a retirement community who, after a talk, came up to her and said, I'm really struggling with loneliness. Do you remember that story, Polly?
Yes, it was so interesting to me because I know that often families want their mothers or their fathers to live in a really good, one of the biggest qualities of retirement communities that they look for is where there's all kinds of opportunities for interaction with people and all kinds of cultural activities and exercise classes and yoga and movies and all these kinds of things. And what this lady said to me, which I thought was so sad, she said, I have a hard time just opening my door, the door to her apartment. That just simply leaving her apartment was a big challenge. And here she was surrounded with all these opportunities, but she couldn't do it. She wasn't participating in any of those things, which of course is why she was taking my class, because I specialize in showing seniors, people over the age of 65, like Linda and me, how to take advantage of the latest findings from the field of neuroscience and apply those to everyday life so that you're living with just a much more, how would I, satisfying and joyful life.
Yes, and more engaged.
Hmm.
But that's a process. And so if you're feeling alone today, or if you struggle with loneliness, as many of us do, then you're in good company because I give that woman a lot of credit, knowing that you were a safe person for her, that
Hmm.
she felt that she could come up and say that to you, but also
Right.
that she could put a finger on her emotions because many times we have a swirl and we can't really identify what that swirl is in our brains. But she identified that as loneliness. And you're right, people do want to live in great senior communities and stay active and be a part of things, but it's just not that easy. And my mother, who was very social in her day, also moved to a senior retirement community, independent living, which I think this lady was in, that you were visiting with. And I told her, quite frankly, because as many of you know, I have a long list and years in working in and with seniors in independent living communities. So I knew what my mom was facing, kind of, but not really. You don't really know until you're there. But I just said to my mother, I said, Mom, everybody living here needs a friend. They need a kind word because, like you, they are moving to a new community. They've probably lost some social connections as a result. They've probably lost spouses. Maybe diminished health has caused them to move. And maybe it's not an in town move, maybe it's a cross country move. So,
And in many ways, I think, we are spoiled, especially, and I'm going to say this about St. Louis because there be maybe listeners from other places where it's different. But in St. Louis, the first question you ask somebody is, what high school did you go to?
yes.
Because people have grown up with automatic friendships being there since they were in kindergarten. And for the first time in our lives, as we get older, for the first time, in certainly in this area, if you've grown up here all your life, for the first time, instead of friendships just blossoming naturally around you because you're with your friends all the time, even since kindergarten, for the first time, you are plunged into a situation where it just doesn't happen naturally unless you are the person who makes the first move. And we're so
Correct.
used to just being, that it just sort of, it should just happen. No, it doesn't just happen. To have friends, you need to be proactive. And that can be scary, but it's not impossible. There's tiny things you can do.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the word proactive is really what we're going to be talking about here today. But Polly, you brought up a good point to me when we were talking about this, and you said there's a real difference between solitude and loneliness.
Right. To me, solitude is something I really look forward to because I spent the whole day going out, running around, and I love to come home to just my kitty cat. My mother used to say when I would come with my four children to visit, she would say, "Love to see him come, love to see him go."
Yes, we
And
got that same talk.
right. And what she was saying is she loves to have us come and visit, but she loved her own time and she had things to do. I think that on the other hand, and so I really appreciate the days when I don't have to go out because I get to do right behind me here. That's a whole art studio that I have. I have a puzzle going. I have so many different activities that I'm involved in that I really love having some solitude time. It's
Yes.
time for me to, get myself back together and have that wonderful peace and quiet. And it's time for me to do things that are creative and so on and so forth. Loneliness, on the other hand, you could be in an entire room full of people and feel lonely. And to me, it means we feel like we're unheard and we're unseen,
Yes.
that we've lost connection, that we don't have a connection to anybody. And that's and it breeds feel a lot of feelings of loneliness. And then there are some of us, especially but I'm 82 now. By this time, I mean I've lost two husbands. So,
Yes.
and so some of us are going through that phase of grieving too, which in which is something that is necessary. It is a process that's part of the healing process.
Yes, ma'am.
But as I've neither of us are therapists, but there does come a time if that is going on more than 2 years, then it is time to get some extra help. And I think we should definitely point that out as we start this conversation about loneliness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because again, not therapists, and then knowing that there is a place for mental health professionals.
Yes,
So,
yes.
if you're listening today and you know what is best, but things can change. And I think that's where we're going to focus on today, and just
Hmm.
to bring this back up on the table so that we can all talk about it and then realize that we're just not alone in
Hmm.
this thought process. And so, I'm a hugger. And so, if that lady had come up to me, I probably would have given her a big hug and thanked her for sharing her emotions, and also just wondering what would be the best next steps for her. I'm just a firm believer in smiling and saying hello. It really doesn't cost me anything. It allows me to engage with other people. I had something happen to me in my life as a young mom, and I have just not forgotten it, Polly. And I had gone to a meeting, and I walked in, and of course, that's intimidating. Just walking into a group that you do not know anybody. Okay. But I walked in, I got myself in the car, I got myself over there, and I walked in. And of course, nobody acknowledged that I was there. I signed my name in because that's what we were supposed to do. And then I asked for the head of the group because that's the only name I had. So I went over, I found the person, I said hello, and probably asked her some dumb question like, what are we going to do today? Where should I sit? And or something like that. And she just said, oh, just have a seat anywhere, dear. And then we're going to break up into groups. So, that if I had hands in my lap or a napkin, I was probably going like this and fidgeting. Okay. So it wasn't so bad. I got assigned to a group and I went to my group, and then they broke up for lunch. And you know what that's like when people break up for lunch. They don't sit in their group, they go with their established group. So, odd man out, new person in the room, where am I going to sit? So, it's kind of like you either stay and live through it or you run out of the room and say you have an appointment. But I stayed. And so I'm going through the line and I'm taking a little bit of food and I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is going to be a hard next step. And then I heard my name, and some lady who I will never forget called my name and she said, Linda, Linda, come sit by me. And I fortunately had a good grasp on my plate. And I turned and I waved, and then off I went to sit by her. And I leaned over to her and I said, I can't thank you enough for acknowledging that I was in the room, that I did not know anybody, and I didn't have anybody to sit by. Thank you so much. And she said, I moved around a lot, and someone did this for me, and I have never forgotten it. And I can tell you to this day, I have not forgotten it. And I try, that's my way of not being alone.
Right. And
So,
it reminds me of one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, which was when you go to a group meeting, instead of acting like a guest, start behaving like a host. Instead of waiting for other people to come to us, look for the other person who might be all alone. And that's the person to start a conversation with.
well, I didn't realize that that's what I was doing, but that's
Mhm.
exactly what I do in those situations. In fact, the way my mother decided to navigate the senior community was to make arrangement with one of her people that she had met. They would get a phone call late in the afternoon and they'd say, hey, are you going to dinner tonight? Or one of them might say, no, my kids are coming, or I'm going out, or whatever. But on the days where there was nothing going on, then they'd say, okay, well, let's go down there at 5, and then they would plan to meet. I noticed that in the days where I was working in the senior communities, and I believe they still do this today, which if your community doesn't, start the program. But being a senior ambassador only means that you're saying hello and that you're inviting somebody to sit with you. And in my head, that might be the only reason why I don't feel alone, is that I have invited somebody that I don't know to sit with me. And of course, we can all talk about, it's not that I might have a lot to say to this person, but what about what they have to say? Can I bring them out of themselves? Can I find out where they're from, what they're all about, and pull them into the conversation? And then guess,
Curiosity.
yeah,
Hmm.
the curiosity.
Hmm.
I use this, and sometimes we use this when we take our time with those who have dementia. They always have a story. But have you stopped to listen to what somebody else has to say? I'm just here to tell you, as someone who has had career fields like Polly that has been in marketing and sales, is that, you have to get over yourself. But I think that is knowing that everybody has a story and making that other person, pulling them in, benefits you as much as it benefits them, and it helps them not to feel so alone either. So that's just one thing that we know from little techniques that you can learn from two
Yeah,
professionals
I,
here.
I think that the underlying message of everything that we're going to talk about today, or that we've already talked about, is that the first step to solve the problem of loneliness is that we have to take responsibility and stop waiting to be rescued by somebody else.
Oh, amen to that. But I would
And it
prefer
can
to
be a
be
tiny,
rescued.
tiny step. And I've got a bunch of suggestions with me. But it is, I think the first thing is to recognize that the only person who can really solve it is ourselves, but we just have to find ways that are not intimidating. To expect ourselves to suddenly go from not going to big meetings to suddenly going to all the different meetings and all the different activities, that's not going to happen. It's taking it in little tiny steps, which we'll talk about more. And Linda, I think you were also going to talk about, we know when we are, how would I say, when we isolate ourselves through loneliness, it affects so many things. And it's one of the reasons why it's so important for us to actually be more proactive instead of waiting for somebody else to take us out of our loneliness.
Absolutely. So if you're concerned about your physical health, your mental health, and your cognitive health, then it is very important that we listen and learn and understand why sometimes people have onsets of cognitive decline is because we're not using the brain muscle. We're not trying to step out of ourselves. We really generally don't have too many goals. And sometimes that can really be a cause for not only your physical health, because loneliness is not good for people. It causes a physical decline. And of course, the mental health aspect is certainly key in this as well. And then, of course, the cognitive decline. We find that people actually do better when they're in social environments. But as you just heard, Polly and I, having professional jobs, have figured out little tips that help us to be successful in these situations where we actually feel like a shrinking violet, where we would rather pull back rather than step forward. Polly, one of your tips, I think, is to arrive early. Be the first one in the room.
Yeah, that is, I, yeah, I'll explain how I came to this conclusion. Here I am at 82, and I have my business, which is called Thrive After 65. It's time to go out and do networking. Well, I started this business when I was 79, and I had been retired for quite some time from a career in sales. And all of a sudden, walking into these meetings was just as scary as can be because inside me, there's a little 10-year-old who is always going to different schools. And the scariest thing was to walk into a new classroom of people that I didn't know. And one of the things I figured out for myself, and this is just a tiny little step, but it makes a huge difference. If going to a new meeting or a new group of people is a scary thing for you, number one, get there first because then you can be the host greeting other people and starting conversations when there's only two or three or four people around instead of plunging yourself into a room of 20 or 30 people or more where you just feel completely overwhelmed, which is the way anybody would feel. I mean, I would feel that way. And I've got lots of experience as a public speaker and workshop leader and all of that kind of thing. Get there first. So that would be one of the first big tips or tiny tips. A big tip for a tiny little thing you can do to make it easier to get out there and be involved in different groups.
Absolutely. I was just at a networking group 2 weeks ago, and this a lady was standing by herself. Well, again, I had walked into this great big room of people. I was not the first one there, so I'd walked in, but I knew this lady, and I hadn't really seen her for a long time. So I stood there and connected with her, and then actually another lady came up and talked to us, and then another lady came up and talked to us because those big groups are intimidating for everybody. But we actually had a lovely conversation. Then after I felt comfortable, I kind of moved around. But I noticed that the woman who was standing by herself was still standing by herself, but another lady joined her who actually preferred to not be in a big group of people. So
Right.
you are going to find your person in a big group of people, and don't think that everybody's created equally, because we're just all very different in those situations. But I guess the key thing here too is that we tried, right? When you
Mhm.
try and you're successful, you feel a little bit better. I know as a senior, My husband complimented me on my technology wizardry, and I just had to laugh because I do not consider myself a technology wizard at all. But I know that there are seniors who are pulling back from technology 100%, and I find that that might be pretty detrimental because so many things are technology based, just your social security benefits, your Medicare benefits, there are health benefits. You have to get online and see things. So to pull back from technology can be very isolating as well. And Polly and I had a conversation about COVID. Think of where we would have been without FaceTime, without the ability to work virtually, without our cell phones. I mean, I can't, it was lonely and awful, and some people loved it, but I felt my brain was really changing when I was by myself. I was losing my social capacity. So when we started coming back from that, it was very tiring, and I kind of lost that ability to plan. So what we don't use, we're going to lose. But for those who might be thinking about pulling back from technology, I would encourage you to stand up, stand forward, and get connected. And there's all kinds of ways you can do that.
Yeah,
Polly,
I think what's intimidating is it means learning new things.
absolutely.
And for many of us, it's been a while since we've had to learn something new. For myself, this past summer, I had some help, created a website, and then I also have a platform in back of it that's called a CRM system. It is highly detailed. You have to learn so many things, and inevitably, I would create something and then forget to save it, and then have to start all over again.
Ugh.
And the reason I'm bringing this up is that a lot of times we cut ourselves off from new opportunities because it's intimidating to learn something new and we don't want to look dumb and so on and so forth. But having technology and learning to use at least it so that we can have conversations with people online, like Linda and I are doing right now, learning to use an iPad or a tablet of some sort, learning to use our cell phone. I did about 10 years as a caregiver myself after I retired, and I was shocked to find how many people had cell phones and hadn't yet never set up their email boxes. So a
Right.
doctor's office would call and say, "Well, your appointment has been changed." They never got the email because their or the voicemail because their voicemail box was completely full. And then they would
Right.
get angry and upset because they'd show up for the appointment that wasn't there. You know, taking that time to learn something new. And there's so many opportunities for seniors. And Linda, you had a list of different places. I know for like I teach at Oasis, which is a continuing education program for older adults. But there's all kinds of senior communities, don't you think, Linda?
Oh, yes.
People can
There's
just
community
bring in a
colleges.
computer or a tablet and say, "Here,
Yes,
help
help.
me."
In fact, a university near me is doing a senior program specifically for seniors. But yes, community colleges, your local school districts offer adult education opportunities. Apple offers classes. AARP has Senior Planet. So there's no reason why you cannot learn to operate your phone.
And
And
there's
of course,
grandchildren.
and I was going to say, and if you have grandchildren or young people in your life, they love helping seniors. But my caveat,
I did not know what a hashtag was. I, I still don't exactly understand.
I don't either, but I just play like I do. So, yes, I don't understand all of that. But yes, grandchildren are good. Just make sure that you have the phone in your hand when they're teaching you, because I have to do it in order to
Yes.
learn it. I
Don't just
don't.
have somebody show you. Have them, you actually have them, I would say, have them make you actually do the action and the activity, because otherwise it just goes right over your head.
Absolutely. That is
Totally.
that is key. Polly, the lady that talked to you about being lonely. What where do we begin with that? I mean, we talked about our
One of
own
the things, because
situations.
I teach these classes all the time, and they're, about taking principles from neuroscience and creating small steps and changing behaviors. And one of the things that I came up with from it was an idea that I got from a conference call of people who are involved in the same field as I am. And somebody came up with the idea of a toolkit. And I thought, oh my goodness, we could create a toolkit for loneliness. And
Okay.
I'm talking about the kind of loneliness when you're by yourself and you are really overcome with lonely feelings, feeling really isolated and disconnected and that nobody cares and those kinds of really serious feelings. And it's a three-step toolkit. It's really simple. And if you have a pen, you might want to write it down or else, contact either of us on our websites. But here it is.
Ready.
Um, First of all, when you feel lonely, get out a piece of paper and make a list of all the lonely thoughts that you're having. Because we identify those feelings, but we don't often take time to think, well, what are the thoughts that are going through my mind that are making me feel this way? So the first thing to do is to write down all the feelings that are coming up, the thoughts that are coming up, instead of just the feelings, the thoughts, because there are a whole series of thoughts that are making you feel this way. And that's the first step in owning, in owning what we're feeling and what we're going to be doing next. So the first thing is to write down what are the thoughts that are making me feel lonely. The second step is to remember the sound of music, raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens. And then it goes down to when the dog bites, when the bee stings, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember my favorite things and then I don't feel so bad. So you've got a list of the thoughts that are making you feel lonely. Now make a separate list. What would be the other thoughts that you would prefer to have? And in many cases, would be the exact opposite of the lonely thoughts. What would be the other thoughts? And then start looking in your environment. And this is the third step. Look in your environment for the things that make you feel happy, like whiskers on kittens. For me, it's my kitty cat. Maybe there's pictures of a favorite vacation. Maybe there's pictures of people that you love. Maybe it's your favorite kind of special tea that you make in a special teapot with a beautiful cup. And there's different things that you can do that will create those feelings. So
So could that be like nurturing myself?
yes, it's
Okay.
self-nurturing, exactly. But we're the ones we can't wait for somebody else to do it for us. But
Yeah,
these are just
nobody can do
tiny
that.
steps. Number one, when you're feeling this way, or even if you don't want to feel this way, you want to write down that toolkit before you even get yourself caught up in feelings of loneliness. Write down, well, what are the thoughts that I have when I'm feeling lonely? What are the thoughts that I would like to have? And what are some things that would make me feel different? It's the first step in taking responsibility for where we're at and making a change and taking action.
Okay, so I can lead a horse to water, but I can't make it drink. I can make my list. I can identify my emotions and thoughts that are giving me that pain and that grief of loneliness. I can switch that gear to see what what is meaningful, what makes me happy. I can start doing those things on my behalf.
Hmm.
And this is not motivation. It's not discipline. This is about
It's
the
just an
little,
action.
yeah, the action items that
Right.
you can take, that I can take, that are pretty simple,
Hmm.
or we can choose to stay in our loneliness, right? So we can either open our door and say hello, or we can stay in our room
Hmm.
and have the worst life possible.
Right.
It's
And be
it,
lonely.
and be alone. I mean, we're always going to have that sense of loneliness. We're never going to fit in 100% of the time. You know, you have to find those things that are about yourself. And honestly, I talked to a lady she was contemplating whether or not to move into a senior community. And she said, they keep telling me all these activities, all these things. And she goes, you know what? I just don't need activities. I like to read. I like to, knit. I like to write letters. I don't want to do art projects. I don't feel like I want to get on a bus and go somewhere. I am very happy by myself. Okay, she figured it out. So, you know, that's what you're talking about here is figuring it out for yourself and then maybe
Right.
putting those items in your toolbox
Hmm.
and knowing who you are. So well-intended adult children, mom, you need to be doing this. You need to be doing that. And I have to say to adult children, I say, did your mom always do those things? Did you was this a part of her life and you're seeing that you want to give her this opportunity, or was that never a part of her life? It's funny. I would say mostly the parent has not been this parent, and you're expecting them now at age whatever to be somebody different.
Yeah. Mom, you should do this. Mom, you should do that. Mom, you should be more outgoing. Well, if mom never was in the first place, she's not going to be now.
Probably not. Probably not. But that's
That
not to
doesn't
say
mean she has to be isolated and lonely.
that's right. So nurturing yourself and we withdraw into our own selves because we think at our age, those are old age thoughts that this is where we are and this is what it looks like and things aren't going to change. And really you just said to this lady, open the door, go out of your
Right,
room, go
right.
down the hall, and if you see somebody, say hello, and then get on the elevator. And then if somebody's in the elevator, say hello to them and say, hey, what you're doing today?
Okay.
That's not that
So
hard,
that
is
just
it?
starts me off. So would you like a list of tiny habits that people can do?
Yes.
I'll be happy because I made a list right here just so that I wouldn't forget anything. So
Okay, and we
the
can
first,
do it. I was just going to say, we can tie this into Valentine's, Galentine's, Single Day Awareness. This is
right,
perfect.
right.
So, yeah, go ahead and give your list.
Okay. So yes, that's right. That's why I'm wearing red because it's soon going to be Valentine's. I see you have a little red. Is that a heart on your
Oh,
phone?
it's a very fashionable lady.
Oh, I see. The modern
Yes.
splash of red.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So just some very simple tiny habits that one could do for loneliness. One of the things is having a habit that as soon as you walk, especially if you live in a retirement community, that as soon as you walk out of the door, the first person you meet, you're going to say hello to. Now, another similar kind of habit, especially if you're at home, it would be when you go to the grocery store, you will look for at least two people that you could either say hello to or give them a compliment. People
Yes.
just brighten up when you give a compliment. Oh, I love the way your shoes are, or boy, that's a really nice jacket, or where did you get that purse, or just any kind of a compliment. That is such an easy thing to do. It will just light up the other person that you're talking to. So that's just a very, very simple thing that you can do. Another very tiny habit would be on Sunday night when I come home from dinner, I will get out my calendar and I will make a plan for whatever group or group event. And I'll make a plan for one person I'm going to invite to have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea with me.
Yes.
I have several friends that we get together for tea because tea isn't expensive, but you get to, we have our teapots, we have pretty cups and stuff. We make, some little cookies or something like that and have a nice visit. It doesn't have to always be something elaborate like going out to dinner or going to the movies or something like that. Just a little opportunity to get together for tea can make a big difference. After, let's see, another one would be like after you set your alarm at night, you set the intention that tomorrow I'm going to say hello to five people or give people compliments. Just giving any kind of appreciation to people around you and thanking them for what they do. Again, it will just it's like a flower starts blossoming and opening up. People love that. When I go to the grocery store, I already mentioned that. Small acts of kindness,
Yes.
offering to get somebody, go up, and if maybe they are missing their utensils, getting up and going and getting their utensils for them. Offering to pick up somebody's mail for them. Little small things like that. I live in an apartment building and there's four other apartments in the building that I'm in. And for Valentine's Day, I make Valentine's cards.
Oh, they're
Now, this is
pretty.
first, but it says love on it. And I'll put some candy kisses or something with it. You can do little small things, but it makes a huge difference in somebody else's life. And I think it goes back to what we started with in the beginning. Stop being a guest and start being a host of your own life instead of
Ah,
waiting for other people to do things for you. Okay. And
yeah.
just sharing giving other people a space to talk, asking them about their experiences, what was it like for them to do things. So being the person who asks, I will ask somebody about their life first. It's interesting when you get a group of people who are over the age of, well, I'll say 65, how easy it is to get together and everybody starts talking about their health problems. I, I've made it, if there's people that I meet with regularly, we usually start out by saying, all right, everybody gets 1 minute to download the latest doctor's visit. But then we are going, and I started carrying conversation cards with me. There's
Yes.
all kinds of conversation starter cards. And I said, we're
Yes.
going to talk about something else instead of the same old, same old. So just a simple
Absolutely.
step of getting conversation cards, bringing them with you so that people have opportunities to share about what it was like when they were growing up or their perceptions and things that they've learned. Conversation cards are a simple, tiny thing, but could make it really interesting conversations, especially if you're living in a retirement community where you're at the same table with the same group of people often. Instead of just talking about, how would I say, the news, which is
Or
not always
or how
the,
bad the food is.
or how bad the food is,
Yeah, that
or
could really
what the
change.
latest doctor's appointment is. Yeah, I would really, again, be a host instead of a guest.
Yes, and I thought about Valentine's Day and what a perfect opportunity to say, "Hey, what was your best Valentine memory? What was your worst?" Or
Yes.
what are you doing to share
Okay, for
Valentine's with
my
somebody
Valentine's Day,
else?
well, I live alone. So what I did was I invited a good friend. I have a good a cooking friend. We usually get together once a month and we do a gourmet dinner for ourselves. So I invited my friend over and I'm going to make beef bourguignon. And my friend
Sounds
is going
good.
to bring all the ingredients. We're going to make ourselves a flaming dessert, like bananas Foster or something really festive. So that's what we're going to do. And I've sent out a whole bunch of Valentines that I made to a whole bunch of friends of mine.
And that's what I'm going to do, some Valentines. And then I got some tins, some heart tins. So I'm going to make little cakes because,
Hmm.
it's just kind
Hmm.
of a sweet thing to do. And it's just a way for me to interact with people that maybe I wouldn't get a chance to interact with and make their day feel special. But, there's also, if you love dogs, taking your dog to the dog park, you're going to meet somebody who's like minded. In St. Louis, the St. Louis Art Museum does free Fridays. And so my husband and I just showed up at the docent desk and took a wonderful tour. I'm shocked at how much we learned in an hour. But we were with people we didn't know, and I didn't feel lonely. I felt filled and learned something new. So I'm going to share too that being with people at events that you care about, if it's the symphony or if it's the theater or if it's art museum or if it's sporting events or whatever it is, you don't have to worry about being alone because you're going to be in a community of people who care about the same thing. And
Absolutely.
and that really helps.
Pursuing things that maybe, maybe your life was so involved being a mother and a wife that you sort of forgot about yourself because you're so in service to others.
Yes.
So one thing you might want to do is think back to when you were a kid. What were the things you loved then? For me, I did not have an art studio until I was about 75 years old. I I took some painting lessons when I was in my teenage years, and then I went on to college, getting married, women's lib, going out and getting my first job. I never touched a paintbrush or anything for years and years and years. And now look what I have. Because I realized I loved painting back when I was 13 years old and I had never, so I got into making greeting cards and little mini, and I do a lot of watercolors because that's what I loved back then. So that might be a place to look if you're looking for groups that you want to join
Yes.
and things that you're passionate about. Think back to when you were a child. What were the things that you loved? And I loved cooking too when I was a kid. I think
I
the
did
first thing
too.
I ever made was French toast for my dad.
Yeah, I love cooking too. Living in a retirement community, though, mostly people go down for meals, and I've noticed that your home is your sacred space and you don't have people into it because once you're out in the community, everybody's always out there. So I did notice that people did not socialize. But I do think that Polly gave us some great tips because my mother's 102-year-old friend had a conversation list when people came to the door, and he'd say, we're not talking about the weather, we're not talking about politics, and we're not talking about our health. So find another topic, but talk about something different. And it's okay to lead with those things because that's something that everybody can relate to. But I think, we're always, if we're going to bust out of old age myths, we've got to bust out of our thinking sometimes. And so we thank
Oh, you
you.
have to take responsibility, I think. And
Yes.
and if you find yourself in a rut, here's just one question that from the field of neuroscience that really makes will help lead you to an answer. It's when you find yourself in a rut, ask yourself this question: what is making this hard to do? Well, for me, making going to networking meetings was hard to do. And I realized it was hard to do because I was fearful of walking into rooms with large groups of people I don't know.
Yes.
Well, what would make it easier to do? Well, if it was I walked in a room and there's only two or three people, I could do that much more easily. Well, get there early when there's only two or three people. So
Yes.
asking yourself what is making this hard to do is a first step towards coming up with a different strategy and opening up your brain to other opportunities.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to leave you there, friends. We hope that you've enjoyed your time with us. You've enjoyed your favorite beverage. You've enjoyed being with Polly and I because we're happy that we got to be with you. And don't feel bad if you have to replay this episode or at least share it with somebody else that you know that really could use a little punch in the arm, a little, hey, let's get going type of move in their lives. You're going to find Polly at her website, thriveafter-65.com.
Right.
And she has lots of tiny habits for you there.
Yeah, and I would encourage really either Linda or I, both of our websites are listed below this video. And if you've got questions, contact us. There's a contact on both of our websites. There's a place where you can just click contact and we'd be glad to answer questions. And of course, Linda's website is Aging in Place strategiesandanswers.com. Is that correct? If I got it
Well,
right?
actually, you'll find me on the podcast channel,
Oh,
wherever
on the
you listen for
podcast
your
channel. That's right.
podcast. And yes, there's a website that goes with Buzzsprout where it's launched from. But yes,
Okay.
I would love to visit with you. And of course, Polly and I, this is as much about you, listeners, as it is about us. And so if you have a topic, let us know, and we'll be back next time for seniors.
Can we talk?
Bye.
Bye.
Are you interested in learning more about tiny habits? Look for Polly Lemire at thrive-after65.com. You can learn more about aging in place, strategies, and answers by looking for my podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.